Imagine walking into a bar, chaos in the air. A biker's anger explodes, and in a moment, a waitress's shirt is torn. The room goes silent. Everyone is holding their breath, expecting confrontation. But what he saw next made even the toughest patrons freeze in shock. Sometimes the most unexpected truths are the ones that reveal the heart of a person. Pause. Today, this isn't just a story about anger or aggression, it's about courage, humanity, and the power of perspective. The moment it happened, time seemed to slow down. What was once a loud, crowded bar filled with music, laughter, and clinking glasses suddenly shifted into something tense and unpredictable. A biker, already fueled by anger and alcohol, stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, eyes turned. Everyone felt it, that heavy sense that something was about to go wrong. The waitress had done nothing extraordinary. She was simply doing her job, moving quickly from table to table, balancing trays, trying to keep customers satisfied in a busy environment where patience often runs thin. In places like this, servers are used to rude comments and dismissive behavior, but no one was prepared for what came next. Words were exchanged, sharp, heated, careless. Voices grew louder. The biker's frustration boiled over, spilling into the open. Before anyone could react, before security or staff could intervene, he reached out and ripped the waitress's shirt. The sound of fabric tearing cut through the room like a knife. Gasps echoed. Someone dropped a glass. The music seemed to disappear, replaced by pure shock. In that instant, the bar froze. Fear rushed in, first fear for the waitress, fear of violence escalating, fear of what might follow. Some patrons instinctively stood up, ready to step in. Others looked away, unable to watch. A few remained frozen in their seats, unsure of what to do, trapped between outrage and disbelief. For the waitress, that second was humiliating and terrifying. Her vulnerability was exposed not just physically, but emotionally. A public space that should have been safe became hostile in the blink of an eye. Every eye in the room was on her, and the weight of that attention was crushing. Yet even in that moment, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She stood there, stunned, holding herself together as best she could. The biker, too, seemed to pause. The adrenaline that had driven his action collided with the sudden silence of the room. This was no longer just an outburst. It was a moment that demanded reckoning. Whatever he expected, fear, submission, chaos was replaced by something heavier, collective shock. That single action changed the atmosphere instantly. The bar was no longer just a place for drinks and noise. It became a stage where human behavior, anger, and consequence collided in full view of everyone present. In those few seconds, all eyes were locked on the scene, waiting to see what would happen next. At first glance, the situation looked simple: an ugly and angry biker, a frightened waitress, a line crossed in public. Most people in the bar reacted based on what they saw on the surface. Anger rose. Judgment formed instantly. In moments like these, we are quick to decide who is right and who is wrong, who is strong and who is weak. But the surface of any situation rarely tells the full story. Human beings are complex. Every person carries invisible weight: past experiences, emotional wounds, financial stress, fear, and exhaustion. When conflict explodes, what we witness is often just the final spark, not the long trail of pain that led there. The biker's rage did not appear out of nowhere. It was fueled by something deeper: frustration, loss, or a sense of powerlessness he didn't know how to express any other way. The waitress, too, was more than what the crowd initially saw. She wasn't just a server caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was someone working long hours, likely dealing with her own struggles, depending on tips to survive, and forced to tolerate disrespect because walking away isn't always an option. Beneath her uniform was a life full of responsibilities, fears, and resilience. When we only react to the surface, we miss the truth. We turn people into symbols: the violent biker, the helpless waitress, and forget their humanity. Labels are easy. Understanding is hard. Understanding requires us to pause, even when emotions run high, and ask ourselves what we don't know yet. The bar fell silent not just because of shock, but because something deeper was unfolding. The crowd sensed that this moment was bigger than anger or embarrassment. There was a story beneath the torn fabric, one that challenged everyone's assumptions. What had pushed this man to lose control? What strength was this woman drawing from to remain standing? Seeing beyond the surface doesn't excuse harmful actions, but it does change how we respond to them. It moves us away from pure reaction and toward reflection. Instead of shouting, we observe. Instead of escalating, we seek clarity. In that pause, truth has space to appear. Life constantly tests us with moments like this. We encounter people at their worst and assume that is who they are. But often, we are witnessing a fragment of a much larger story. When we choose to look deeper, we give ourselves the chance to respond with wisdom rather than impulse, and with humanity rather than hostility. In the middle of chaos, courage often appears in unexpected ways. It doesn't always shout or fight back. Sometimes, courage is standing still when everything inside you is shaking. After the shirt was ripped and the room fell silent, all eyes turned to the waitress. In that moment, she became the center of attention, exposed, vulnerable, and surrounded by strangers. Yet what defined her was not fear but strength. The waitress could have screamed. She could have collapsed under the weight of humiliation. No one would have blamed her, but instead she held herself together. Her body language spoke louder than words. She stood upright, steady, refusing to let that single act strip her of dignity. That kind of composure in the face of public humiliation requires extraordinary courage. People often underestimate service workers, assuming they are weak because they must smile through disrespect. But what they don't see is the resilience it takes to show up every day, to endure long hours, low pay, and constant judgment. The waitress had likely faced disrespect before, rude customers, unfair treatment, moments where silence felt safer than speaking up. Still, nothing prepares someone for a moment like this. Her courage was not about confrontation. It was about control. She didn't escalate the situation. She didn't provoke further violence. By staying calm, she prevented the chaos from growing worse. In an environment charged with alcohol and ego, her restraint became a powerful stabilizing force. There was also courage in her vulnerability. Standing there, unable to hide what had been exposed, she allowed the truth of her situation to be seen. She didn't run away from the moment, she faced it. That willingness to stand in discomfort, to let the room see her as a human being rather than just an employee, took immense inner strength. For many in the bar, her courage triggered reflection. They expected fear. They expected collapse. Instead, they witnessed grace under pressure. That quiet bravery challenged stereotypes not just about waitresses, but about strength itself. Strength, they realized, doesn't always look aggressive or loud. Sometimes it looks calm, controlled, and deeply human. In that moment, the waitress reclaimed power without raising her voice. Her courage shifted the energy of the room, forcing everyone, including the biker, to confront the reality of what had just happened and the humanity standing right in front of them. The room was already silent, but when the biker finally looked at what he had exposed, the silence deepened into something heavier. This was not the reaction he expected. There was no laughter, no victory, no sense of dominance. Instead, what he saw stopped him cold, and in that instant, the entire bar felt it. What was revealed was not weakness, but truth. Beneath the torn fabric were signs of a life marked by hardship scars, medical bandages, or evidence of struggle that told a story words had never spoken. These were not details meant for public display, yet now they stood exposed, undeniable, and deeply human. The room froze because everyone understood at the same time. This was no ordinary confrontation. For the biker, anger drained from his face as reality set in. The power he thought he had vanished instantly. What replaced it was shock followed by recognition. He wasn't facing an enemy or a defiant server anymore. He was facing someone who had already endured far more pain than he had caused in that moment. The aggression that fueled his actions suddenly had nowhere to go. The crowd felt the shift immediately. Judgment turned into discomfort. Curiosity turned into silence. People who had been ready to intervene now stood still, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. The bar was no longer divided into sides. Everyone was pulled into the same realization. They had just seen something deeply personal, something that demanded respect, not reaction. This revelation exposed more than the waitress's body, it exposed the danger of acting without understanding. The biker's moment of rage had ripped away not just clothing but assumptions. The tough image he carried, the authority he thought he held, collapsed under the weight of what he had uncovered. His posture changed. His expression softened. The room watched a man confront the consequences of his impulse in real time. There was no dramatic speech, no explanation shouted across the bar. None was needed. The truth was visible, and it spoke louder than words ever could. It reminded everyone present that people carry hidden histories beneath the surface, stories of survival, pain, illness, sacrifice, and endurance that strangers never see. The revelation forced a pause not just in the biker, but in everyone watching. It asked an uncomfortable question without speaking it aloud. How often do we harm others without knowing what they have already survived? And how often do we mistake vulnerability for weakness, only to realize too late that it was strength all along? That frozen moment in the bar became a powerful lesson in empathy, not the kind we talk about casually, but the kind that confronts us when it's too late to look away. Empathy begins where assumptions end, and everyone in that room was forced to face how quickly judgment had taken control. Until that instant, most people were reacting based on emotion, habit, and surface-level thinking. The revelation changed that completely. Empathy requires imagination, the ability to place ourselves in someone else's reality. When the truth was revealed, people were no longer seeing a waitress in uniform or a biker in leather. They were seeing a human being who had endured pain long before that night. Understanding arrived not through explanation, but through realization. The room collectively understood that they had been witnessing only a fragment of a much deeper story. For the biker, empathy arrived like a collision. It dismantled the narrative he had created in his head, one where frustration justified aggression. When faced with the evidence of someone else's suffering, his anger had nowhere to hide. Empathy doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does force accountability. It strips away ego and replaces it with awareness. For the crowd, empathy meant recognizing their own role as silent observers. Many had been ready to judge, some had been entertained by the tension, others had simply been passive. That moment forced them to ask uncomfortable questions about how often they watched disrespect unfold without intervening. Understanding doesn't only apply to the people at the center of conflict. It applies to everyone who witnesses it. This lesson extended beyond the walls of the bar. It highlighted how often society dismisses service workers, women, and vulnerable individuals as invisible or expendable. Empathy demands that we see people not as functions: waitress, customer, biker, but as lives shaped by unseen struggles. When we fail to do that, we reduce people to roles and forget their humanity. Understanding also requires slowing down. The entire incident escalated because no one paused long enough to listen or observe. Empathy teaches us that reaction is easy, but reflection is powerful. When we take a moment to understand before responding, we create space for dignity instead of damage. That night, empathy didn't arrive gently. It arrived through shock and discomfort, but its message was clear. Every person carries a story beneath their skin, and when we choose to see that story even briefly, our behavior, our tone, and our choices are forced to change. Every action we take sends ripples outward, often in ways we never anticipate. What happened in that bar did not stay contained within those four walls. One impulsive act triggered a chain reaction that affected every person present, shifting emotions, perspectives, and behavior in real time. This is the unseen power of human actions. They rarely end where they begin. The biker's outburst created an immediate ripple of fear and tension. Conversations stopped, bodies stiffened, people prepared themselves for escalation. One reckless moment altered the emotional climate of the entire room. But when the unexpected truth was revealed, the ripple changed direction. Shock replaced anger, silence replaced noise, reflection replaced reaction. For the waitress, the ripple was deeply personal. Her strength in that moment didn't just protect her dignity, it influenced how others responded. Her calm presence prevented further chaos. Without saying a word, she set a tone that demanded respect. That single act of composure reshaped how the room treated her and how they treated each other. The biker, too, became part of the ripple's next wave. His sudden realization affected the crowd more than any apology could have. People watched a man confront the consequences of his behavior publicly. That image stayed with them. It became a reminder that power misused can collapse instantly when faced with truth. Bystanders were not untouched. Some felt guilt for not stepping in sooner. Others felt gratitude that the situation didn't turn violent. Many walked away with a changed understanding of how quickly things can go wrong and how quickly empathy can transform a moment. The ripple reached into their future choices, influencing how they might react the next time they witnessed disrespect or aggression. Even after the night ended, the ripples continued. Stories were told. Lessons were shared. The incident became more than gossip. It became a reference point, a moment people would remember when deciding whether to speak up, stay silent, or act with restraint. This ripple effect reminds us that our behavior matters even when we think no one is watching. Every choice, patience or anger, empathy or judgment, action or silence shapes the environment around us. We are constantly influencing others, whether we realize it or not. One moment of awareness can change the course of many lives, just as one moment of carelessness can leave lasting damage. What froze that bar wasn't just shock, it was truth. Truth has a way of stopping noise, silencing anger, and forcing us to see each other clearly. In one unplanned moment, masks fell away, and humanity stood exposed. This story reminds us that strength is not found in aggression, and power is not proven through control. Real strength is the ability to pause. Real power is the choice to respect, and real courage is recognizing the humanity in someone before it is forced into the light. Every day, we step into rooms, conversations, and situations where our actions can either wound or heal. We may never be bikers in a bar or waitresses under pressure, but we will always be human beings capable of choosing empathy over impulse. Let this moment stay with us not as a story of shame, but as a lesson of awareness. Because when we learn to look beyond the surface, to act with restraint, and to honor the unseen battles others carry, we create spaces where dignity is protected and humanity is never frozen again.